Live.
All right, welcome everyone to executive committee meeting, August 19th.
Okay.
We're tearing down the
Sorry,
building.
me.
Can we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Fisher is absent. Ms. Kramer?
Here.
Ms. Mail?
Here.
Mr. Michelson? Here. Mr. Follett?
Great. We sent out the agenda. I know we've got some additions because the solicitor sent out his legislative memo after the agenda had been crafted. And then I believe we have another update, the village administrator's performance objectives. We won't be able to touch on that tonight. So that's one modification, two modifications I have. Is to add the legislative memo and take off the review update or objectives until the next meeting.
And before we make a motion to adopt, if we look at the meeting minutes for last time, it says in there that we made a motion basically to continue a particular conversation in here today. I could go find it specifically and point it out, but I believe we also talked about it at that subsequent council meeting. So I don't know if Katie stayed for that. But ultimately the question is, do we want to continue the conversation here or were our questions answered in that council meeting? And to remind you of that conversation.
That was on the minutes where you've got new business resolution 2024-9, adopting the resolution adopting and stating Lost Manor's policy regarding dealings with a nonprofit.
Yeah, so at the very end, so basically page 2 of 4, motion for next executive committee to discuss the procedures for new legislation in the assignments to the solicitor. So David Fisher made the motion, I seconded it, but we kind of had that conversation in council. So my question is that good enough or do y'all want to still hold it here?
Do you want to add it to the agenda?
Right, do you want to add it to the agenda to continue that discussion or specifically about the procedures for new legislation? So this is like, should one council member basically utilize Rob's resources without having talked to the mayor or to the administrator or at least got feedback from us?
Yeah, so I know in the conversation,
So basically, should we continue it, add it to the agenda, or we good? We squash it?
I mean, I don't know if we ever came to anything. I think we need to have a full conversation. I mean, there's a little bit I could add on to it,
Okay.
but I don't think it's,
Okay, well, sorry.
I mean, I can just say what I was gonna add and we can decide if we want to discuss it or not. It's basically Rob had said that, as the legislative body, we can, bring whatever up for legislation. And after I was thinking about it a bit, that's 100% true, but that doesn't mean we necessarily, as legislators, have the right to utilize Rob's time and money.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know if we ever came to a real decision on when it's appropriate for a council person to go to Rob. A council person can always unilaterally bring legislation, but getting council to actually draft it and do the research for it might be a different discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So if we feel we need to discuss that further, I'm happy to, but I'm also happy to not if we're on the same page about that, or if we need to maybe talk about it in council, since it's more of a council specific thing.
Okay. Katie, did you have thoughts on this? I was not here, so I'm not trying to offer a strong opinion.
I did give my thoughts at the last meeting, and I said
Okay.
that as long as we have a process that's documented,
Okay.
I think that's really the most important part.
Okay.
And so I would encourage us to come to a decision, because it doesn't sound like we have.
Great.
Yeah,
Why don't we include that as an update? And what I'm going to ask is that somebody takes the lead on drafting the process for us to talk about at the next one. So not
Okay.
to hash it out in here,
Okay.
but at the next meeting, somebody drafts a process that we can then have a conversation around. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Sounds like another item
Okay.
for the agenda, as short as it will be.
I will, assignment will be added to the agenda. The only other edit I have is, well, actually, can we approve the agenda as modified? So with the legislative memo, removing the performance objectives until the next meeting, and then adding a note about council legislation tasks.
Motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you for that. So the next thing on the agenda is approving the minutes from July 8th. I have a motion to approve the minutes from July?
I think I read those. Motion to approve.
Second.
Who's who's?
Yeah, I made
No.
the motion.
And Zach is the second. Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Next on here is gonna be the flag ordinance. So this is the second time that we're talking about this. I did get a message from David that he would like us to hold on this conversation until he's able to be in the meeting so that we can all be present. And I told him that I would bring it to the group. My only hesitation with waiting, and I shared this with David, we just never have everybody in the room. So I want us to be able to, it's not specific to this legislation, but I want to make sure that we have the ability to move forward and aren't always waiting for everybody to be in the room. And then the other point that I made to him is this is just a recommendation to council. So my voice, Mel's voice, Zach's voice, and David will also be able to be heard again.
Right.
And we waited for you, and you're a resident at that time, and I wanted to make sure we got your voice in that conversation. So I told him I would bring it up to executive committee, all of us, to decide whether we wanted to wait or if we wanted to have the conversation tonight. So, thoughts?
I'm good with having that conversation tonight. I do think it's important that we recognize that not everyone is going to be able to attend each meeting. And this is something that that has kind of gone between council and executive over the last, I want to say, 2 or 3 months. So
Yeah, I think it's since April.
we'll say longer than that. So I think it's important that we can, if we can, address it tonight.
We can talk about that. I support it.
Okay. Did you have thoughts?
Yeah, I'm also talking about it. I assume when you mean discussing in full council, you mean once like David's back and everything like that. Since obviously
Yeah, it's not on the
tonight.
agenda for tonight, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
What we're not on the agenda for full council tonight.
Yeah.
All we're talking about is whether or not we have the drafted legislation that the mayor had Rob draft back in, I believe, April. We had lots of sending it.
Brittany, just, are you on old business?
I'm on old business because
We're not doing business.
Oh.
sorry.
For the minutes.
More.
All good.
Thank you. We'll go back.
Cool.
Motion to approve the resolution 2024 establishing policy for flying flags by the motion, I need second. Great. Discussion about
Plus, flag, here on the schools and studios. So whatever flags that they recognize are usually tied to our national days. Would actually prefer us to come up with that list ahead of time. Actually, like, hey, but every year, so like basically pre year.
So can I asking that in the resolution we name those holidays? Have you passed or you ask what the original resolution separately come? As former,
So every year a new
Constantly.
council, you're right, that makes sense.
if you have to get this approved every year,
Right.
that feels perhaps there's a list that we can use to update.
Or whatever it is.
Comfortable with not being in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So could you recommending to have a in the ordinance or decided upon